Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this edition of the Valley View. This week I'm joined by Councilman Tom Andersen from Ward 2.
Hi.
And Tom, we've had kind of an upheaval on the City Council, I guess. You could describe it in other ways, but...
I would say that's true, Ken, and it's been a very interesting past few weeks, and I will tell you that interesting is the word that I taught my children to say when they couldn't say anything nice about something.
Well, yes. But it has created kind of... Salem's gotten in national news because of Councilman Benjamin's
yes, they
actions and his subsequent resignation. And so maybe you could talk a little bit at the beginning about what led to it, because I'm not sure everybody is aware of what's happened.
Well, what led to it, me personally, was, gosh, it would have been the Tuesday before the Monday night meeting, which was the 28th.
So that would have been the 22nd of November.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. I woke up with my email going off, binging like crazy, and I thought it was my wife who was in the Himalayan mountain kingdom of Bhutan, and her emails come in about that time because of the time difference. So I got up to go answer it, and it was constituents who were horrified by Facebook postings on Councilor Benjamin's Facebook page. So I went on and looked at it, and I was horrified. It wasn't just the one about Black Lives Matter, and the one about Black Lives Matter was it commented favorably on a video that showed people driving cars running over Black Lives Matter's protesters. And I mean running over them, hitting them, throwing them on the hood, putting them under the wheels. It was stomach churning and vile. And so this is about 7:15. By 7:45, I had filed a motion with the City Council to investigate Council Benjamin's Facebook postings, including but not limited to November 17th, which was the day that one was posted, to see if it was appropriate to censure him. And as the things went on, I also said we should ask him to resign. We cannot expel a councilor unless the councilor has committed a crime or has not been active in the city council business for 30 days. So the rest of the council joined in that motion, and you know, we heard it on the night of the 28th. And I will tell you, Ken, from Tuesday morning to Wednesday night, I had over 130 emails, and that's 10 times more than I've gotten on any other issue. And every single one of them said a variant on the, this is disgusting, it's vile, it should not, it's not acceptable, it should not happen in Salem, and especially it should not happen from a city councilor, and this is not the image that Salem wants to present to the world or should present to the world, and it's not what Salem is. And also it's not what anybody should present to the world. And I will tell you, before the website was cleansed, I looked at a bunch of other postings, not the website, the Facebook page. I looked at a bunch of other postings, and they were equally reprehensible and vile. They were anti-Semitic. There were more racist ones. There was anti-LGBT. There was Second Amendment stuff, but it was kind of far out Second Amendment stuff, not the people should have guns to hunt and that kind of Second Amendment stuff. So the whole thing was not at all fitting for any person, and nor for someone who was in the position of a councilor who's supposed to represent the city. And I think, Ken, it's especially I don't know, it's especially serious and egregious in the current political climate we have in our nation. And the whole Trump campaign and his tweets and the way he behaves has given license to other people to express those opinions which ought not to be expressed ever, and they ought to be, no one should have them, and if they have them, they should keep them under the surface.
Well, that has been the case for the better part of 50 years.
Yeah.
And because I used to hear it a lot when I was young. And I grew up partially in the South, so I was used to hearing a lot.
Yeah, you're talking about the racial stuff now.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, and with the change that happened with the civil rights, is that it became less acceptable to more people that you could say that in public.
Yeah.
And you would think that he would have noticed.
Well, you would, but that was also the Richard Nixon strategy, the guy who did the Willie Horton thing, Atkinson or Lee, somebody.
Lee Atwater.
Lee Atwater. That was, let's talk about state rights. Let's talk about
but you
inner
do it
city.
in coded language.
Yeah. And that's not acceptable either. But
no, but you could get away with it.
Exactly. And
so on November 28th.
Yeah.
Well, actually on November 23rd, he actually turned in his resignation.
Yes, he did. And I would say that let's just say there was some behind-the-scenes activity to
convince him,
encourage him that should be done.
Okay.
And nevertheless, every single person who wrote me, when I replied, I said, come to the council meeting on the 28th and speak your piece. Because it wasn't just important, Ken, that the council take action, but the people of Salem needed to speak up. The people of Salem needed to indicate to the world what Salem really is like. And that really happened.
And what's acceptable and what is not.
Exactly right.
And I was there for that, and I heard a lot of the testimony, and not just from the various groups, but also individual citizens would get up and talk. And for the most part, they were adamant about his resignation and that it should not be tolerated.
They were, and they were also, their statements were articulate and powerful and heart-rendering. There was an imam who spoke, and you know, I mean, you know, I'm now talking as the son of a minister and the brother of a minister, and what he said went right to my heart, and it was a beautiful, inclusive, we're all part of this world message that people needed to hear.
And I think there was also some people there that were also offering to help Councilman Benjamin. Because obviously he has some problems.
And no, I agree.
And I think that is something that can't be forgotten.
No.
That, you know, this person that I think was having trouble on the city council, and that he wasn't prepared. But I mean, I don't wish that on anybody.
No.
But the thing is that he is responsible for his actions.
Yes. And you know, I made this comment a couple times, and it's normally an analogy that the conservative and fundamentalist religious people use, and it's usually when they're talking about anti-homosexuality issues. They say, I love the sinner, but I hate the sin. And that analogy can kind of be moved over to the Benjamin situation, looking at it from the total opposite side of the political spectrum. That the sin is egregious, but he's still a human being, and he's still a child of God, and he is still someone who we should look at as has the capacity to grow and to learn from this. And I think he did. If you look at his original response was like, if you don't like it, get off my Facebook page, or calling me a racist is itself racist. I mean, those are absurd responses, but just in those several days, he grew enough to realize the import of what he had done and how it was best for the city of Salem, and really for him, that he resigned. And he did. So I say he deserves credit for that.
Yeah. Now, this puts the city in a position where they can't just appoint somebody.
No. No.
Because he has basically 2 years left.
Yep.
There were 2 years left in that term.
He and I came in the same class.
Right. So they're now going to have a special election.
Yeah.
And on the December 5th City Council meeting, there was some discussion. In fact, you pulled something off the consent calendar.
Yes,
about
I did.
having-
I have a reputation for pulling things off the consent calendar.
Because and now everybody understands what the consent calendar is, but it's basically things that there's no real need for discussion about, and it gets passed, and people a lot of times, it's over before people know about it.
That's exactly right.
But you wanted to have a conversation about
Yes.
the timing of the
Yes.
election. So maybe you could explain what your concerns
Well, the
were?
item on the consent calendar, what the city code says, and you had it exactly right. If there's more than a year left till the next primary, you have to hold the new election right away. And the city code says at the first available time period or something like that. So on the consent calendar, it said, I want to say March 14th. It was
Correct.
setting an election for March 14th. But then if you back that up, Ken, there's certain deadlines that have to be met under the county elections and the state elections law. And so the petition from somebody who wants to run for council has to be in to the city recorder's desk on January 3rd. And so here was my concern, and this is why I pulled it. Had I not pulled it, we just would have voted it yes or no, up or down, without any real discussion. And my concern was that that's a very short period of time, because the council meeting was December 5th, and that petitions had to be turned in 4 weeks later, and one of those weeks was going to be the holiday season.
And some people
New
start
Year.
that holiday a little early, so you're out
Yeah,
shopping and doing
or
all
stay
sorts of
late.
things.
Continue late.
It's a
Yeah.
really bad time to try to be doing
So
that.
I wanted to get the wisdom of the council, the collective wisdom of the council, as to what they thought about this. I thought it was something that needed to be discussed. And I have to say, I thought we had a good discussion, and the majority of the councilors who testified who talked about it really made 1 or 2 points. One is this ward needs to be represented. We need to get somebody as soon as possible, which I sort of drew an analogy to the current Supreme Court. I mean, you've got 4 justices on either side, and Justice Kennedy is no longer the swing vote in anything, and so it's the same thing here. We have 4 votes on either side, and it would be good to make it an odd number so we definitely cannot have ties on anything. So that was one thing. We need to complete the council and get that ward represented. The other one, and this was kind of an interesting point of view, was if you are dedicated, what happens, let me back up. You have to get 50 signatures of 50 people who are in that ward registered voters. So in reality, you better make sure you get 60. You can operate on voter lists, so you can do
Right.
that, but you want to have more than you need. So you've got to get those. And the interesting point made by some of the other councilors was, if you are a dedicated person who is really committed and really interested in serving on the council, it should not be a problem for you to get these. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. But as we also know, this is the rain season, the early night season on top of the holiday season. So what we actually ended up doing was, because we can't even start the petition process or make petitions available to people until we set the election date. So we set the election date unanimously, but there is a provision in the city code that says any counselor who votes for a motion on the winning side
Can pull it later.
can bring it up for reconsideration a week later, and you do not, or at the next meeting, and you don't have to, most of the time if a counselor wants to bring something up, we've got to put it in a week before the hearing, or before the meeting, and you don't. At the meeting, someone could bring it up. So I discussed that and said, look, if we see there are potential problems down the line, we've got a week to sort of analyze this, and then we can potentially pull it. But we've started it now so people can come in today and get their petitions. And I think if you live in Ward 6, you need to come in and get your petition.
Well, it would help if you've been active in that
Yeah.
ward,
Yeah.
because it's not just that you got to get the signatures.
Yeah.
Now you got to go out and campaign.
Yeah.
And the campaign is going to be in January and February, which
Yep.
you still have short daylight hours.
Yeah.
It's going to be rainy. So you're going to have a different set of problems
Yeah.
than you usually would have.
Well, there's another thing I want to talk about too, Ken, and this is actually what I've been doing, is reaching out to various groups because, and this relates directly to the whole imbroglio surrounding Councilor Benjamin. We do not need the City Council of Salem to be full of people who look like me. We're a diverse community here, well, as diverse as Oregon can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for example, 20 to 25%, depending on how you look at the figures and what figures you look at, 20 to 25% of the population of Salem is Latinos. And so we're underrepresented on the council. With the incoming council, we're not so much underrepresented on women, although we are a little bit statistically. But we're clearly underrepresented with anyone who isn't part of the Caucasian folks who mostly live in Oregon. So I have been, I'm going tonight to the Council Human Rights and Relation Committee. I'm going to discuss that issue. I have been many times, 2 or 3 times, to Chemeketa Community College to talk to young Latinos and Latinas about the importance of government service and how to do it, and how we need to hear their voice in the Salem City Council. So I'm reaching out to people who, boy, I hate that term. I am contacting people, who I know from this. I've been in touch with a woman I know from the Sikh community. I've been in touch with several people from the various Latino groups around town, and I've also been in touch with the NAACP folks. And I'm urging some candidates from one of those groups to present themselves.
And this ward is quite
heavily
heavily minority.
Yeah.
And one of the problems in this ward is that usually there's a very low voter turnout.
Yep.
You have a lot of people that are renting, that move around a lot. So this is probably going to be an extremely low turnout election.
I characterize it as a low civic involvement ward. And that is true. And so that doesn't make their views or opinions any less valuable. Yeah, but it's harder to find somebody in that ward than it might be in West Salem or South Salem or someplace else.
Now, you were mentioning in your comments about it being a 4-4 split with the new city council. Maybe you could explain what your meaning is, because these are nonpartisan positions.
Sure.
So.
Well, yes, they are, and I'll use an example here of the proposed new bridge. It's called the 3rd bridge, but I call it the 4th bridge because we already have 3 bridges in downtown Salem, the 2 car bridges and the bike pedestrian bridge. When I ran, I did not shy from the label of being a progressive Democrat, and I ran on the platform of many things, but one of the points was the 3rd bridge is unnecessary for countless reasons. And I beat a candidate who was in favor of the bridge and was backed by the local groups that are basically in favor of the bridge. Then this election, the same people who helped me helped 3 other candidates who were identified as progressives to run in wards 1, 5, and 7. And each one of those 3 candidates was opposed to the bridge, again for a number of reasons, and they beat 3 other candidates who were in favor of the bridge, and 2 of those were by landslides. And
one of them was an incumbent.
One of them was an incumbent, and the challenger beat the incumbent 62 to 38%. So this is clearly an indication to me that the makeup of the council is going to change starting in January. And that was one of the things I did last night, where we actually had the final vote on the 3rd bridge. And probably the easiest thing to say is what I said there. The final thing I said was, why are we in such a hurry here? And then I answered my own question, because none of the other councilors would answer that question, either at this meeting or a prior meeting. The reason we're in such a hurry, or the council power structure is in such a hurry, is because the vote would change on the same issue after January. And the folks who are listening to this, if you want to see a real full story of what happened, you should go to my Facebook page, which is called Tom Andersen, a progressive voice for Salem. And there's 2 or 3 recent postings that talk about that particular issue, and then if you go back in time, there are many postings that talk about the issue of the bridge. So this is a changing time for the Salem City Council, and it's going to be a different council starting in January.
And this Ward 6 could be a very interesting swing vote.
Yes, it could. It certainly could, and so I am sure that there'll be some candidates who various interest groups or groups who have various positions will want to find and support.
One of the other issues that's going to be confronting the new council is the failure of the police facility bond to get passed. And this is going to be another issue that's going to come up in this election, I am sure. Because I believe it was Council Benjamin himself at one point was talking about having a presence closer to his ward by the police facility.
Well, again, a little background here, Ken. This is very strange to me because I am, the progressive Democrat, the flaming liberal on the council, but I seem to be the fiscal conservative. I'm against the bridge among other things, that there's no way we can afford it and pay for it, as well as it's not needed, it's not ecologically sound, all these other sort of things. Well, with respect to the police station, let me first say that we have a great, wonderful police department, starting from the chief all the way on down, and there may be a bad apple or two, which is another, but in general, the police department serves the city of Salem extremely well, and they need a new place. But throughout the entire deliberative process, my view was we should cut down the cost of the police station, and we should combine it with a combined measure called the public safety bond measure, which would also earthquake-proof City Hall and the library and all those complexes, because that's the safety of the public. That got no traction. Then when we went to the station itself, the final station as proposed was going to be an 82-point-something million bond. And I made 2 motions to cut down the costs, neither of which were seconded. One was to not have a communication center. We already have one, and we don't need to go into the details, but that would have saved $11 million. Then I said we shouldn't build a 166-unit 2-story parking garage for civilian employees, not for the police cars, but for the policemen, the police person's cars and the civilian employees' cars, when we had 1,000 space parking garage within 2 blocks that is owned by the city, and its peak times is 40% full.
And that's peak time.
Yes. And that would save $4 to $5 million. And I got no seconds on those motions. So I didn't even make my other 2 motions, one of which would be to get rid of a community room, which would be $1 million plus. The other would have been to, instead of anticipating that the police force will grow over time at 2.4 officers per year, and then you're planning out 30 years, so you've got 30 times 2.4 more officers, I suggested we should use the historical growth of the police department, which is, depending on your figures, 1.3, 1.5, 1.8. And all of those things would have cut the bond measure down. Since I didn't get any seconds on my first 2 big ones, I didn't even bother. But I voted with the entire majority of the council to put it on the ballot, because it needed to be on the ballot. Right. And now that it got defeated, I think the final percentage was like 52 to 48. So it was close, but not.
Well, I think most people,
close.
and most people recognize the police do need a new facility. It's just that I think a lot of people just felt like it was too much that they were asking for, and they weren't fixing City Hall and the library. And a lot of people like the library.
Oh yeah. So I've had discussions now with the city manager about things, and also with a couple of the other councilors, just informal discussions, and I think we're just going to let things lie until the new council is on. But we need to put something on a ballot measure as soon as possible. And if at all possible, I am going to push for this, whether it passes or not, to combine them. And I will tell you that the council, way back when we were deliberating on this, asked the city manager to give us a complete report on what it would actually cost to upgrade the earthquake-proof the entire civic center complex there, the library, the city offices, and city hall, as well as other city-owned properties, so we can get a good idea of what it might be. But I also think it would be the height of arrogance to refer the same ballot measure, or it would be also, I think it was Einstein who called it insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think we have to listen to the people and we have to cut down the cost, and there are ways to do that. So I think that'll be probably the first challenge facing the incoming mayor and the incoming councilors when we start to convene in January of next year.
And the site that they were using was still pretty small.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem, I think. And because one of the arguments made, well, we might not be able to keep this property because it might get sold in the meantime. Of course, it's been vacant for well over a year.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I'm not convinced that you need to have it in the downtown area even.
Yeah.
And the North Campus is going up for sale, and the city is, I heard some talk about affordable housing being used out there. Why not the police facility?
Well, a couple responses to that. The first one is that the council or the city, with council approval, we've got an option on the O'Brien property, and that option runs for 6 months from, I don't know, October, November. It runs through the next May election.
Okay.
And the option says that, if we don't exercise the option, we lose the money. And I can't remember what it was, maybe $50,000. I mean, that's a lot to you and me, but in the whole structure of the city, it's not. And if we do exercise the option, that money goes toward the purchase price. So that's one thing. The other is the issue about the North Campus. And I have heard that before. I have discussed that informally, but I'll tell you, and I know Salem Week is going to be doing an article on this because I've just been responding to a bunch of questions about it.
Oh, okay.
DAS, which is the State Department of Administrative Services, they have a mandate from the legislature to sell the property as quickly as possible and for the best price possible. So I know that there's the possibility of a police department, and I do not dismiss that idea as being out of hand, but I do know that
it's going to be tough to do.
That's exactly right. I don't know that idea will get traction with the city, but I think very quickly, as the city council, we have to look at all those options. Everything's back on the table, from building on that site alone on a lower cost size. And the motions that I would have made could have brought it down to high 50s, mid to high 50s millions instead of 82.5 million. We're going to have to decide, do we want to combine it? And that's going to depend on what the cost is to earthquake-proof the civic campus. And let's say they both come back pretty high. There's other options that we might want to look at.
Right.
And including potentially the North Campus site, including maybe how do we look at how we reconfigure the whole civic center complex. Because I'm telling you, one of the things that we learned in this process with the architectures about building a police station is that the most inefficient, or maybe the least efficient building style is the style that we have downtown. The brutalism architecture with the U shape, and brutalism is an actually type of architecture, and that's a great example of it because it looks pretty brutal. And it was very popular in the 60s and 70s, not so popular now. But the U shape,
all the concrete.
All the concrete and the vast empty spaces that aren't really
connected.
Or don't really serve any purpose. I'm talking now about the big atrium.
Yeah.
The most efficient way to build a building is to have a center corridor going down with offices off of it, not a U or anything else. So those are things we're going to have to discuss.
Well, Tom, we're probably going to have to continue this discussion.
I'd be happy to, Ken. I like talking with you.
Okay. And I want to thank you for watching Valley View this week.